Hello my friends and welcome back. Thank you very much for being with me again today. This article asks some interesting questions and I thought that I should share them with you and see why the Russians would do what the Ukrainians claim they are doing. This article comes from Ukrainska Pravda, so obviously it's a Ukrainian news outlet, and it's from December 18th, 2022. Russian troops are preparing for street combat in captured Melitopol. All right, why do they do that? No worries, the Ukrainians will tell us, and they would not lie to us. Russian invaders are preparing for street battles in the temporarily occupied Melitopol. Concrete pyramidal, the pyramid-shaped anti-tank structures known as Dragon's Teeth are being installed in the city center. Now that's a surprise, isn't it? This article, the source is Ivan Fedorov, the mayor of Melitopol, on Telegram, and I'm quoting Mr. Fedorov. Invaders, what are you preparing for? The Russists, in parentheses Russian forces, have been placing concrete cones in the very center of the still occupied Melitopol for the second day now. Perhaps over the past week, the occupiers are in such a jam that they are already preparing for street battles. Fedorov noted that Russians are placing dragon teeth closer to civilians in the middle of central streets and residential areas. At the same time, the mayor says that concrete Legos will not help the occupiers. Moreover, they can also impede the invaders when they will be fleeing the Ukrainian land. Previously, Valery Zaluzny, commander-in-chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, said that in order to reach the borders of Crimea, Ukraine's armed forces need to overcome the distance of 84 kilometers to reach Melitopol. Now, didn't he give you the answer, kind of? But you never know. Never know. It's it's like a game of chess. The game is not over. So the same in many other areas. They say it's over. It's not over. What's his name? If you remember that line in Rambo, that Rambo 1, when he was in the whatever police station over there, and his Rambo's general, his guy who trained him, tell him, hey, you need to go home and take care of a woman or something, you're a little bit uptight, and it's over. And then Rambo turns around, it's never over. That kind of, it's never over. I think it's Rambo 1 or the one then he was left in Vietnam by a weasel guy, and he comes back to the base, military base, and fucks him up. That's where it's never over. Something like that. That's fucking funny. So it's never over. Wait, it's over when it's over. He added that this will be enough, as the liberation of Melitopol will give Ukrainian troops full fire control of the land corridor to Crimea. So they need Melitopol in order to jump on Crimea. And then, you know what? Background. In early December, it was reported that the Russian occupiers strengthened the so-called security measures in the temporarily occupied Melitopol, as well as brought concrete fortifications for the captured Crimea to the city. In addition to the occupied south of Ukraine, Russians are fortifying at least Belgorod and Kursk oblasts of Russia with the use of dragon teeth. I can't weasel out and not agree that why in the hell you put those things over there if you are going forward. You say, well, you're preparing for what? That's only for a defense. You prepare those if you own them. You know what I mean? I mean, if Melitopol is part of Russia nowadays, then why would you put all those things? That means you're expecting, in a possible scenario, someone to come and try to get it. So that shows a little bit of planning ahead, but planning ahead in a losing mind. And I don't think the Russians intend to, lose any more land. But I remember I listened to Colonel McGregor, the retired U.S. Army Colonel Doug McGregor, and he said this: the Russians, and he was right. The Russians never had a problem with losing ground. Like for instance, like retreating, because for them it was just a temporary thing, and then on the way back, they're gonna regain those things. So you know you lose a little bit here, but you don't lose too much in order to regroup and then advance even more. And the examples that obviously are over there are obviously the Napoleonic Wars or invasion of Russia by Napoleon, and then it was the Second World War. Now, the Second World War, I don't think they lost. They lost. The Germans got to, I was about to say Berlin, to Moscow, about 15 kilometers from Moscow, because the Russians let them. It was not that, but they had to, it was planned, or because, and not because, they were overextended, they were unprepared. I'm talking about the Russians, until they got, together and blah, 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 blah. Then they broke away at Stalingrad. But it was not only Stalingrad, because after Stalingrad, the whole thing went back towards Berlin. So they gave up. There's two examples, but it makes only sense to lose today and fight tomorrow and regroup. It's the same thing in a boxing fight. You sometimes lure the guy into it. Sometimes you can't make it, but you just block, or you just stay there and in the cords and take it until the other guy exhausts his energy, and then you just like Muhammad Ali in I'm always this three-line Manila, but it was not. It was Zaire. Mobutu, remember, with what's his name, George Foreman, 1974, I think it was. So the same, rope-a-dope. But in this case, it's not about rope-a-dope, because it's not like the Ukrainians are pummeling the Russians. It's not like that. But they're preparing. Interestingly enough, in the center of a town, you expect people, guests? It seems like they expect guests. Now, you know what I didn't see, and I didn't see in this war at all, and that is because it seems like the war dynamics changed so much because of the technology. I didn't see deployment of forces behind enemy lines. You know what I mean? So that means you fly, like for instance, the best example would be the landing in Normandy landing, the D-Day. They flew over the German lines, right? Parachuted them over there, and the guys came from behind, or some of them went front, some of them came from behind. So they got as slim the German force was. 10% of the German army was on the Western Front, and 90% was fighting the Soviets. That's the reality. It's not me saying that out of my ass. Books say that. So when these guys say, well, we open a new front, Stalin asked those guys in the West 3 times, I think 3 times, hey, open another front when they were losing, when the Soviets were going back. He said, open another front over there so you can divert, the mass of Wehrmacht and all that, and instead of going towards Moscow, turn around and, because the Germans were empty. Towards France, in that area was empty. So when these guys landed, they have 10% of the German army. The rest was fighting the Soviets. So I'm not trying to minimize anything. I'm just telling you the numbers. And I want to say the truth, but even the Americans say that. I mean, that's a fact. It's not me like, hey. And if you look at it that way, imagine that you fight someone who has 90% of his force over there, and you have 10%. That's why the Russians, and not only the Soviets, and not only look at the debarkation, the landing in Normandy as not an important thing. Why? Because when this guy landed, you know where the Soviet army was with the front? They liberated the entire Soviet Union at that point. They were coming and coming and coming. So that was unnecessary from the dynamic of the war. If the landing was not there, the Russians would have still come over and take it. But the problem was, where would they have stopped? That was the problem of the Western countries. It was an economic calculation. Get and miss the Russians somewhere and keep the communism there. Without them, the Russians would have done the same thing. Well, the Westerns helped with the Lend-Lease and many other reasons. And besides, it was another front, if you remember, from Sicily, from Italy, that was coming and coming and coming. So I'm not trying to minimize anybody. I was talking about just the parachuting people behind the enemy lines. I haven't seen nothing like that. But if you don't control the skies, what are you gonna do? Because it seems like when you go over there, they're gonna shoot you. It's not like, oh, 1,000 bombardiers go up and then drop this much bombs like in the Second World War and go on. It's not like the same. They talk, oh, the Russians are sending missiles. Just look at, for instance, at how much, how do you call it? How many bombs, the quantity of the bombs, missiles, bombs, rockets, whatever the NATO used in Yugoslavia, and you're going to find out, you're going to be surprised of the quantity. Compared with the Second World War, for instance. Anyway, so, I don't know, they expect something and not something good, it seems. Building those futile, pyramidal concrete blocks. I don't know what they think they're going to do. It's like the Chinese Great Wall. You break it in one spot and everything else is useless. But anyway, here the same. You all that thing, you just break it in one side or 2-3 sides and then everything goes through. And what, the Russians are going to hit that particular point? They know best. Anyway, we'll find out. Thank you very much for being with me again today. Stay strong, stay smart, look for the truth, and be just.